You were preparing your moves like a grandmaster, while everyone else was making easy ones. As you totally altered the course of events and took control of the same game that they thought they had perfect control over, the skeptics looked in shock. But you arrived with chess genius, and they arrived with checker zeal, which is simple, predictable, and amateurish. While they were busy moving their tongues, you did notice their patterns. You assessed the dangers during the period when they were rejoicing too soon. And when it came time to attack, you moved so precisely that they couldn't even recognize what had happened until you were already basking in the glory. A player and a boss are different because you have mastered chess, and everyone knows who is in control of the game you are playing, while they play checkers. They had you all figured out in their thoughts. They saw someone who was too weak to compete with them in the game, someone they could manage, and someone they could manipulate when they looked at you. They saw your stillness as a sign of weakness, and your patience as a sign of hesitation. However, they overlooked the fact that you were watching, studying, and preparing more than you were just playing the game. Actually, they had never encountered a more deadly enemy than you. You gave them the impression that they were in charge of the situation, even though they saw you as an easy target. You nodded when they rejected you, smiled when they undervalued you, and said nothing when they bragged about their alleged accomplishments. When they undervalued you, you grinned. They believed they could outwit you, but in fact, you were giving them the opportunity to expose their own weaknesses. You collected evidence during your inquiry, including every insult, dishonest behavior, and effort to discredit you. You were more than just sitting there. You were learning how they moved. The problem with those who think they are untouchable is that they stop observing their surroundings. They assume that you will never fight back because you haven't, so they let themselves feel secure in their illusions. However, while others were too busy celebrating their premature victories, you remained silent. They thought that you were weak since you did not respond. Your lack of participation led them to assume that you were afraid because you were not as good as them at the game. They thought they had triumphed. Conversely, that's exactly how you intended people to see it. If you affirm these words by writing Amen, God will provide you with all the desires you desire in your life throughout your existence. In order to serve you better, we have activated our Join membership. You can buy this membership for only $20 and become a permanent part of this community. You were working on something really important while others were spending their time plotting, slandering, and competing against a version of you that had vanished. It wasn't that you were trying to impress people or gain their favor. Rather, you were focusing on the bigger picture, which was on really important acts. They were passionate, impetuous, and fast while playing checkers. But you were playing chess. You were precise, strategic, and immobile. Instead of seeing that they were the ones standing on a precarious foundation, they spent so much time attempting to tear you down. You never even entered the traps they placed for you, despite the fact that they were there. They used your name to try to damage your reputation, but all they managed to do was strengthen you from the inside out. They had already ended the connection by the time they realized you were not who they had been thinking you were. As you can see, you never needed their permission or had to meet their requirements to compete. Even though you made them feel like they were in control, they were only acting the way you had expected them to. The game ended when you eventually made your move, checkmate. Allow your love to show if God's gifts fill your heart to overflowing. Give $20 or more by clicking the Super Thanks button to help sow the seeds of faith that will change the lives of countless others. His riches is reflected in your giving. Serve as a conduit for His grace and see His kingdom grow via you. There were many who thought you were a simple target. They were waiting for you, watching you closely, and making sure they were tracking everything you did. They thought they knew where you were going, how you were going to respond, and when you were going to give in to the pressure. But after that, there was silence. Your absence was an indication of mastery rather than loss. Instead of moving silently, you took on the appearance of an illusion. You recovered all that had been stolen from you while they were busy eating away at your vigor. You stopped showing up when they were expecting you to. They started to fear when they realized you had turned into someone unpredictable and untraceable. You must realize that the game changes when you make it impossible for them to follow you, restrict their access, refuse to engage with them, and stop stroking their egos. They lose control. If you want to claim this message, you can show your support by paying a super thanks amount of up to $20 and typing 1111. Their whole approach was based on your responses, your presence, and their ability to follow your every move. But you managed to execute the most potent maneuver imaginable. You just disappeared without notice or explanation, slipping out of their clutches. The first perception was that you were struggling. They persuaded themselves that you had lost, that you were hiding out of embarrassment, and that you had finally been broken by their little games. But the issue with those who operate from a position of insecurity is that they are always under the impression that being silent is a sign of weakness. They believed that you had nothing left, but you were really building everything they couldn't see anymore. You've mastered the art of losing out on chances, the ability to avoid predictable replies, the ability to stop defending yourself, and the ability to keep your next move a secret. The paranoia started to set in when they realized they couldn't even get in touch with you. You weren't posting even though they were looking over your pages. No one knew what you were doing at the time, but they asked about you. Those people who used to ignore you now spend their days searching for signs that you are about to fall, but they never found any. The whole board was changed as a result of the ghost move, which caused you to earn levels rather than lose them. They were unaware that you were anywhere other from where they had left you until they heard your name again. Being in the same league as you was no longer even feasible. While you were miles ahead, moving silently, piling up your victories and getting ready for something greater. They squandered time by observing your every move. While you were leaving, all of this was taking place. The thing that sets you apart from them is this: they have a little part to play, need to be verified, and need a network of support. That being said, you know that genuine authority does not need to declare itself. Genuine power doesn't look for other people's approval. Genuine power develops covertly until it is too late to recognize it. They thought they could keep up and that they were in charge. But they were proven incorrect the instant you disappeared. There is no way they can find you right now. They were able to support their egos by relying on a regular schedule and a framework. They depended on your responses, were fueled by your responses, and were unable to operate without your vitality. They expected you to react in some manner whenever they provoked you. Every time they expressed skepticism, they awaited your return. But all of a sudden you stopped. In the future, no further answers, justifications, or access will be provided. Their whole game ended abruptly as soon as it occurred. They were unprepared for the lack of sound. You were supposed to fight, to protect yourself, to prove yourself. But you let them talk while you were at work. You let folks make assumptions while you debated. You let them waste their breath, even if you were higher up. They were thus unable to keep control of the board after you stopped playing their game. They convinced themselves that you had given up, and they laughed from the start. Because you didn't disclose their name, they were able to convince themselves that you weren't significant. However, as time passed and you remained silent, your confidence started to decline. There is a reason you are here. Respond to the call if you sense it. Click Join to have access to a strong community, insightful insights, and unique material. This is an awakening, not only a membership. Enter your divine calling. Become one of the selected. They began to question what you were doing as time passed. Anticipating that you would have something to fight with, they started searching for signs of failure. Well, the only thing they found was a riddle. Nothing exacerbates paranoia in an insecure person more than something they cannot understand. Their obsession grew as their ignorance increased. They began contacting you in previously unheard of ways, looking for information, sending you messages that weren't sent to you directly, and trying to get you to respond. They believed they were in control when they were younger, but now they were spending their time chasing shadows in search of proof that they were still significant. Moving and quiet is thus a lovely thing. You become a mystery when you stop defining yourself, when you stop justifying your choices, and when you stop responding at all. The reason they are afraid is because they can't read you, they can't predict you, and they can't give you power. Type Amen to embrace the angel's blessings. Show your support by giving super thanks up to $20. Based on your remarks, you can see how they created their identity. They flourished because of your emotions. They were reliant on your energy, but they ran out of things to eat when you decided to go your own way, when you turned your focus inside and walked away. They understood then that you had never been the weak one. Rather, your presence was the cause. They finally failed because of their obsession. You have been making progress, winning and becoming better, while they have been watching, waiting, and waiting for a moment of weakness. While you are trying to create a future that is so far ahead of them that they will never catch up, they are now stuck in the past and repeating old fights. They were in a panic because they had forgotten that you were never just another player in their game, but that you were the one controlling the board as a whole. They thought they were in charge of everything. They based their tactics on your past because they were sure they could use your flaws against you. To ruin your reputation before you ever got there, they murmured your name in rooms you hadn't been in on that foundation. They set traps because they think you will fall into them. But they didn't understand that you were already changing the script while they were busy plotting your downfall. Even if they tried to stop you and thought they could point out every error you made, you had already turned it into a lesson. Every myth they spread was allowed to run its course because you knew that the truth would outlive the falsehoods. They didn't realize that you had quit playing their game altogether, since they were so focused on pulling you down. People who depend on manipulation have the problem of assuming that everyone else acts in the same way. They want you to react emotionally, to battle for approval, and to want to refute their assertions. You did not waste your breath, however. You had people dig their own graves as you were establishing your kingdom. They made an effort to set you up, but you refused to fall for it. They saw you collapse at the side of the road, just to see you ascend even higher. They made desperate attempts to modify their tactics and think of fresh approaches to pursue you as soon as they realized that they were not yielding the expected outcomes. That being said, it was already over. They never took the time to consider their own circumstances because they were too focused on playing against you. By their own acts, they overextended themselves, made poor decisions, and lost the game. How did they come to believe they were in charge of you? It's gone. Because you choose to let them ruin themselves rather than fight them, they no longer have the same effect that they once had. What's the last step? You couldn't be touched. It wasn't necessary for you to argue or prove anything while you were leaving. You let the silence speak for itself. You let your accomplishments do the talking. As a result, they are now forced to accept their losses while you keep winning. They thought they had you under control. They seemed to have the upper hand. However, it was they who ultimately fell victim to exploitation. No way. And they thought they had more time. They thought you would always be available, always be involved, and always have something to say. You were trying to make sure that the war would be won overall, while others were focusing on individual conflicts. His grace is a blessing. In order to spread his light, click Super Thanks and donate $20. His dominion grows as a result of the seeds your donation plants. Act as a blessing. Not only did you succeed, but you also developed as a consequence. They are presently in a chaotic situation as they try to figure out how they lost control of a game they thought they controlled. You never had to put yourself on their level. You didn't have to argue with them in the gutter where they tried to pull you. They were never able to compete with you since you played your game on your own terms and with your own rules. They were too emotional, too desperate to see you fail, and too oblivious to realize that you had already gone on to bigger endeavors. Now it's the other way around. The same people who used to make fun of you, ignore you, and doubt your skills are suddenly the ones on the outside looking in. It is not with derision that people whisper your name, but with surprise, incredulity, and remorse. At the same time, people watch from afar, trying to comprehend how you become impenetrable and how you were able to achieve this. It was their expectation that you would fail. They had been waiting for you to stumble back. However, you have advanced to the point that they can't even get close to you. Their biggest annoyance is not your accomplishment per se, but the fact that they were unable to contribute in any way. Hegemony was unnecessary. There will be no small-time backstabbing, and there is only undeniable advancement. Nothing hurts someone more than seeing you achieve in something they said would never be possible for you. To put it simply, they were waiting for an answer. They wanted you to fall prey to them. Rather, they encountered quiet triumph and the heartbreaking insight that they had never posed a danger in the first place. They once made fun of you loudly and in public. They rolled their eyes at your dreams, mocked your ambitions, and said that you would never achieve anything without their blessing. Because they didn't give you a chance to prove your value, they ignored you. They are, however, the ones doing the most right now, putting on a full-fledged show to get even a little portion of your attention. They had the luxury of pretending you were unimportant while you were still under their control. As long as you were trying and acting small, they were able to convince themselves that you were beneath them. Nevertheless, the switch would flip once you advanced beyond them, beyond their expectations, and beyond all they thought they knew about you. The sense of despair entered at that moment. They expected you to beg to be included to the list. You will later regret leaving, it was sworn. They were so certain that you couldn't succeed without them that they never even thought about what would happen if you were successful. And they can't understand it at this stage. They're running about, trying to find a way to get back in touch with you, and they're hoping you'll glance at them, even for a second. Write Amen for angelic protection and contribute with a super thank you up to $20. Their group conversations eventually turned into fan clubs. Now, with a combination of interest, intrigue, and a hint of envy they can't hide, they are muttering your name. It's the same voices that formerly conjectured about you. They analyze your strategy, evaluate every step you do, and try to determine how you managed to pull it off. For what reason did the one they had previously ignored become the one they now covertly admire? They look expectantly, waiting for you to notice them. By leaving clues, testing the waters, and tasting the waters, they attempt to slick their way back into your life. In contrast, you see them for what they are. Opportunists trying to stay relevant in a story that no longer features them. You don't even care, which is ironic. Whether it's their immediate awe or their total obsession, it doesn't matter to you. You do not need their approval. You do not need their validation. Despite the fact that they had the chance to support you, they chose to mistrust you. That is their responsibility. You are the star of the show now, and others are just watching. Look at them here. They can hypothesize. Give them permission to chatter. The performance must go on whether they are there or not, mostly because they stop laughing at the end of the day. How about you? You're not even listening to them. You didn't need to argue. You didn't need to defend yourself, and you weren't even expected to respond. The only thing expected of you was to grow, and that, in itself, exposed all the flaws they tried to hide. They were forced to confront the truth they had been evading for years as a result of your ascent. They weren't really as strong as they said they were, to be honest. To begin with, they were not as safe as they said they were. Not even in the distant were they in front of you.